So we optimizers very rarely take items into account in our builds due to the high variability of items from table to table, although I have resolved to try and take more account of the items and such that will be helpful to a build in my future builds, and I did try to do so in my recent monk build, the Mercy Killer. Link will be in the description below. But nonetheless, items are very important to a character, right? They have a huge impact on our builds and our abilities and the fun that we have with our characters, because it's a lot of fun to get magic items, right? And so I wanted to look at the new items that are out in Dungeons & Dragons 2024 to see which ones are the best, which is not easy. There's 91 permanent magic uncommon items in Dungeons & Dragons 2024, and paring them down to a top 5 was so difficult. I first went through all of them and called out the ones that I thought were, really good, and it turns out there was like 25 of them. And so with the help of my Patreon team, who, thanks guys, I really appreciate your support. I love you, and if you want to join the Patreon, the link will be below. The list was very difficult to pare down, but I think I've done it. Now, I will say I couldn't help but include a list of honorable mentions, so you could, hear about the competitors for the top 5 and be aware of a lot of other good items. But sometimes you got to make hard decisions in this game, and so I have come up with my version of the top 5 uncommon items in Dungeons & Dragons 2024. Coming in at number 5, we have the Cloak of Protection. Tried and true, maybe even a little bit boring, but it is so good. No changes from the 2014 version, and why would it need it? +1 to AC and +1 to saves is just incredible in a bounded accuracy game, and it's so good that it will probably last you a couple of different item rarity levels. I should mention that I presume that uncommons are going to be acquired and used mostly levels 5 through 8, but some of these are so good that they're going to have value beyond that, and Cloak of Protection is definitely one of them. The upgrade to it in the rare level of item rarity is the Ring of Protection, and it's just as powerful. They didn't bother to increase the buffs because they're already so good from the Cloak of Protection, and they just made it a little bit more wearable. So yeah, Cloak of Protection is one of the most sought after and popular items in the game for a reason. It holds up in 2024, and it comes in at number 5 on my list of top 5 uncommon magic items in 2024. Next we have Enspelled Weapon. This is a new item that is available in 2024, and it is so good. I mean, it gets really cracked at higher levels of item rarity when you can have higher level spells in there, but even the base uncommon version is a banger. And in particular, to me, the benefit is to bring those really powerful Paladin and Ranger spells to classes that don't normally have access to them and don't normally have them figured into their ability progression. Because to just all of a sudden add 6 of them every day is pretty crazy. Divine Smite, Thunderous Smite, Wrathful Smite, Ensnaring Strike, Divine Favor. These are all really, really amazing to come out of a weapon that has 6 charges. I mean, in these levels, that is just so many. So I am very, very impressed by Enspelled Weapon, and that is why it makes number 4 on my list of top 5 magic uncommons in 2024. Moving into number 3, we have the Staff of the Python. Man, I have always loved the Staff of the Python. It is super duper strong. It summons a giant constrictor snake, which, look at this beast. For levels 5 through 8, that is incredible. It has a boatload of hit points. It sticks around a long time, so you can put Barding on it, so it has a good AC, and you could even potentially buff it further. And it's got a great attack. It grapples on a strike, and it is huge. So that means if it grapples meeting creatures, it can just drag them around with no move penalty. Man, that is really, really good. Now, there are a few changes from the 2014 version. It firstly is now universal attunement. Before you could only attune to it if you were a cleric, druid, or a warlock, and so now anybody being able to bring in a giant constrictor snake is fantastic. It also now specifies that there is no action required to mentally command the snake, which I think is inferred by the writing in 2014 as well, but they didn't call it out, and so some DMs might have said that it took an action to do it, but now it's just a free action to mentally command the snake, and so that's good to call that out. However, the big nerf is that it now requires an hour to reuse the item once you revert it from snake form into staff form, and that's probably a good thing because it was a little bit overpowered in 2014, where you could, if it was getting low on hit points, just use a bonus action to dismiss it and turn it back into a staff, at which point it will regain all of its hit points, and then your action to summon it again, and now you've got a refreshed giant constrictor snake on there. It's very powerful, and so I don't mind so much that it got tamped down in 2024. It's still super good. The snake now takes its turn immediately after yours on your initiative count, whereas in 2014 it rolled its own initiative. And that's just way better. Not only is it more streamlining and makes the game progress a little bit faster and doesn't call for your attention to be split, it's just more tactically advantageous and just a really nice change. I like that. So a bunch of different changes, some good, some bad, probably more bad than good, but nonetheless, Staff of the Python is still a banger and is super powerful. That is why it makes number 3 on my list of top 5 Magic Uncommons in 2024. Number 2, we have the Weapon of Warning. Oh my god, the Weapon of Warning got such a glow up in 2024. It is now an item that confers advantage on initiative rolls to every one of your allies within 30 feet, whereas before it only conferred that advantage to the owner who is carrying it. That is so good! To get advantage for everybody, that over time is going to result in a lot more initiatives won, a lot more free actions, a lot more control of battles. It's just such a key factor in the terms of engagement to get a buff like that. That is just really crazy good. It also frees up allies who might be using a Sentinel Shield to get advantage on initiative where they don't have to hold it anymore. And then they can use it to hold like a shield +1 or something and enjoy the magical protection, because believe it or not, it does make it clear in the actual official rules. In the errata, they call out that yes, if you hold a shield where it specifies you get the powers just by holding it, you don't have to equip it. And that applies to Sentinel Shield, and it applies to like Shield +1, +2. You can only equip one shield and get the benefit from that, but you can get the benefit from the magical bonuses of multiple. And so if someone is just holding a Sentinel Shield or a Shield +1, they do get that benefit, but if it was a Sentinel Shield, they don't have to if someone has a Weapon of Warning. It now only wakes you up from a non-magical sleeping versus being immune to surprise, and so that is a pretty big nerf. Although not as bad because the surprise rules aren't quite as lethal in 2024, but still definitely not as good. It only needs to be within reach instead of on your person, so minor little buff right there. And the thing about Weapon of Warning is that even though it's an attunement item, it's not really. It's so easy to offload its attunement to a mount, a familiar, or a summon, because they all get their own set of attunements, and because now all of the powers conferred by the Weapon of Warning are AoE, you don't need to personally attune to it. So, man, Weapon of Warning is just amazing. Highly recommend trying to get one of these for your party as soon as humanly possible. That's why it comes in at number 2 on my list of top 5 magic items in Dungeons & Dragons 2024. And finally, at the top, we have Winged Boots and Broom of Flying in a tie for number 1. I know I'm cheating a little bit. It's actually a top 6 list, but they're basically both an attunement for a fly speed, and you're not going to want both. You're going to choose one based on other factors. And so either one, best item in the game in terms of uncommons. They are a bit different. The Winged Boots are now a fixed move speed or fly speed of 30, whereas before it was equal to your move speed. And so that's a bit of a nerf for fast characters like monks and rangers and hill giants and wood elves and stuff, but still pretty darn good. And now it is 4 charges, and each charge confers 1 hour of use, versus it used to have 4 hours of use that you used in 1 minute increments. And so that is also a bit of a nerf, because if you're putting in a really long day where you have more than 4 battles, you're not going to be able to fly in each one of them, whereas in 2014 you could. The Broom of Flying also got a few changes. It is now specified that it requires a magic action to mount the broom and get it flying, whereas before it was just a command word. And it didn't specify that it called for an action, so in most cases I think you probably didn't need an action to get the broom flying again, but now you do. And that could be important, because you could get separated from the broom, and if it's in combat, you would have to waste an action in order to get back on it and start flying again, whereas you didn't have to in 2014. So that's not a good change. It now stops hovering when you are no longer astride it versus only when you land. It still stops when you land in 2024, but it has that additional rider. And so, yeah, again, you could potentially get knocked off the broom and then have to waste an action to remount it. And it's just more clunky and confusing regarding the move. Like, it has its own move speed, so it can't dash because it's not a creature. But then you could get off of it and then use your own move speed as well to increase the distance. And, you know, some people or some DMs created table rules for it. So, like, they might call for you to use the mount and dismount rule. So if you got off of it, then it was half your movement to dismount. And I've seen rules where you have to have like a free hand available in order to ride the broom. So there's just like more that you need to work out with your DM. But on the upside, it does have the potential of conferring a flight speed of 50 versus 30. You have to be light enough, but if you are light enough, then that extra movement is pretty enticing. So the choice of whether you take a boots or a broom is going to depend on your build. If you're light enough and you want that 50 fly speed, then it might be worth dealing with the unreliability of it. And I think most people would rather have the boots because they're just more reliable. You can get back up in the air faster if you get knocked down. You don't have to deal with like DM rulings and such. But regardless, despite the changes, both of them are amazing. Having a fly speed in this game is amazing. It's always a benefit. It helps you kite. It helps you get to places that you want to go, but it also is sometimes necessary. You are going to need it in order to engage flying enemies sometimes. So it's just so good. And it does enable the famous drop combo where you grapple them and drag them up and then drop them and they take damage and they're prone and they're set up for your allies to get attacks at advantage. And that's always fun. Right? I did that on my monk build. And so while it is disappointing that you can't drag them up 60 feet or even like 120 feet with a dash and then drop them, you can still do it with wing boots at a speed of 30. You can dash to 60. Pretty amazing. That is why wing boots / broom of flying are number one on my list. I think it is the most, or they are the most powerful uncommon magic items in D&D 24. Now, I did want to go over a few honorable mentions. I'm going to just quickly blast through these because I don't want to spend too much time on it, but there was a pretty decent list of strong items that challenged for the top 5 and just didn't ultimately make it. Firstly, we've got the Gauntlets of Ogre Power and the Headband of Intellect. Both of these are amazing. Free SIs are sick, and you always want to get them if you can. They affect a whole host of die rolls, and the Gauntlets of Ogre Power especially can be build enabling, especially if you're playing in a Westmarch format like I often do. The items that you get are more or less under your control, so you can actually make your build where you dump strength and then get gauntlets and then later a belt to buff your strength, and now all of a sudden you've got stat where you used to dump it and now it's like a strength, and it can enable certain builds. Then we've got the Sentinel Shield, which again, by rules as written and rules as intended, you can hold it and don't have to equip it, and you're still going to get the benefit of advantage to initiative and advantage on your perception checks. And multiple people can hold the shield. It's a little clunky, but if you know you're going into combat, that's a nice option that you have to get multiple people advantage on initiative. Then we have the Stone of Good Luck, +1 to saves and +1 to checks. That's fantastic. Not as good as the Cloak of Protection because +1 to AC is better than +1 to checks, but they're both still really good. You might even attune to both. There are the Pipes of Haunting and the Wand of Web. These are both really amazing control items for these levels 5 through 8, where I expect you to have uncommons. The Pipes is non-attunement, so technically it's better, and it's one that you might use later in your career, but it does have a fixed save DC, so it's not going to scale all that well. And same with Wand of Web. But at these levels, I'm not expecting you to have like so many items that you have to choose which ones to attune to. Wand of Web is one of them. That's just fantastic. Web is one of the strongest second level spells out there. To get 6, maybe 7 charges of that spell, in a session is really, really powerful. We have the swimming items: Cloak of the Manta Ray, the Ring of Swimming, and the Cap of Water Breathing. I have always loved Cloak of the Manta Ray. Obviously, it's indispensable if you're having any kind of underwater adventure, but I've also found use of it anytime there's like water on the map, which is sometimes more often than you think. And if you have these swimming items, then you can use those bodies of water to kite or hide in, or you can drag enemies into it, and now you have normal attacks and they are attacking at disadvantage, etc. So I've always really liked these. Cloak of the Manta Ray is attunement now, so I would probably choose the Ring of Swimming and Cap of Water Breathing combination, but on the other hand, that is 2 items, and Cloak of the Manta Ray is just 1 item, so depending on how rich you are and how much choice and how much availability you have in terms of items, the Cloak of the Manta Ray might be sufficient. The Shield +1 is amazing, because bumps to AC are amazing, and in fact so amazing that armor doesn't get +1s until the rare level. So it's like 1 level behind weapons and class items in terms of that +1. And so for a shield to get it at the uncommon level is just really, really good, for those characters that can use a shield. Then we have the +1 class items, including weapons +1 and wraps of unarmed power. Only the Rod of the Packkeeper made it into the Dungeon Master's Guide 2024. I presume that the other class items are going to be coming out here pretty soon, and those are also really, really good, although they could make my top 5. Then we have Enspelled Armor and Enspelled Staff, the 2 new items that are counterparts to the Enspelled Weapon, which did make the top 5. These only made the honorable mention, but they are still bangers. The Enspelled Armor can have Shield, or Shield of Faith, or Sanctuary, and I think Shield is probably the killer app here, to get 6 shields on a character that can't normally cast Shield, or even someone who can normally, since shields aren't resource free. That is just amazing to have on armor. Shield of Faith makes it +2, which is like a pseudo very rare. Sanctuary can be very good in certain scenarios, so very impressed with Enspelled Armor. And Enspelled Staff. Unlike Armor and Weapon, which have limited schools of magic that you can choose from, you can choose any school from Staff, so you can basically put any spell in it. And there are a bajillion good first level spells, right? You can do Cure Wounds, or Healing Word, or Command, or lots of good first level spells. So yeah, all of those made my honorable mention list. And man, there were so many more that I wanted to, but I didn't want this video to take a million years, and I just couldn't put them on there. Some items are not attunement, so if you pick up a Goggles of Sight or Eyes of the Eagle or something that you will be able to carry throughout the rest of your career, definitely get it. Just beware they're not as powerful as some of these other uncommons. Or at least in my estimation. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you disagree. If you do, please let me know in the comments. Do you like my list? Did I make a good one? Do you think, oh no, this item should definitely be in the top 5? Let me know. I'm very curious to hear. Regardless, thank you so much for watching. This has been Bill Bronze and Dragons. I'm your host, Bill Braffelstone. See you next time.